This week on the pod, we have Andrew Watson. Andrew is a youth coach with Youthfully, and he specializes in helping students navigate the maze that is the career landscape, educational landscape. There are so many options these days. A lot of students are overwhelmed. The introduction of AI has just even further created uncertainty and challenges that students are facing with decisions that they need to make. And they're trying to make these decisions as early high school of what courses they need to take to set them up for the universities and set them up for a particular career. So we're going to chat through a lot of that today with Andrew. And my first question, Andrew, is why are students so overwhelmed?
Hey, I think it comes down to a couple of things. First and foremost, the abundance of choice out there. Super easy to see all these different pathways before you that you could possibly take. They all feel viable until we go in and do a more thorough evaluation of what fits our interests, what would make us feel fulfilled, and then validate if we have the qualifications to get into a certain field over another, as well as the quantity of info. So even once a student narrows down what they might be interested in, the world of the internet, as well as other channels of information, just makes it feel like, where do I even start, right? And sometimes in the human brain, when you're faced with so much information, a natural reaction is to just shut down. And so that doesn't set up a really nice environment to start pursuing this information in a productive way. And I think the other point to make there is how final the decision can feel, right? In an interesting book I read years ago, they talk about deciding what career path to pursue as being one of the first very difficult big life decisions, of which there's only 5 or so, 4 or 5 throughout your life, where you really have to make a decision that's going to have implications possibly for the rest of your life, or at least for a chunk of years to come. And so the idea that while we pursue all these different choices and gather information to make our best decision, there's this underlying pressure among students that I have to make a perfect decision. And I'm sure we'll unpack that and similar themes during the podcast. But the sense that this decision is final, and for young people, for students, they haven't had to make any decisions like this before. So it's a new environment, it's a new type of pressure and a new feeling. And so I think challenging some of the perspectives of that is really important. To build momentum and start to see deciding on what university program to study and what career field to pursue as being an exciting opportunity more than a burden that's going to define you or restrict where and how you live your life from that point forward.
Mhm. Yeah, it is really the biggest first decision that students need to make, and they're making quite a few at the same time. So I can understand the importance that they place on this, but at the same time, I can also understand how difficult it might be if they're thinking that this decision needs to be perfect. You literally did your master's thesis in this topic
Yeah.
of students like navigating their career path. Uh,
Yeah.
did you find that there was I've learned also this concept about the paradox of choice, having students
Yeah.
or having people just have so many different decisions. So if you're at a restaurant and there's a very simple menu and you only have a few options, it's easier to actually decide what you want to order versus if you go to one of those like country style cafes where they have 3 different pages on the menu and everything looks pretty good. It takes people way longer to actually make a decision. So the number of options make it more difficult for people to make a decision. And back in the day, when our parents were young and when our parents' were young, there was that limited menu of options, like doctor,
Sure.
lawyer, business person, financier, whatever. And then there's now so many subgroups and subgroups. Did you find that during your research when you were doing your thesis on this, that the paradox of choice over time increasing led to more overwhelm?
Absolutely. That exact theme was something that I wrote about. And I think the original study of it was the quantity of mustard choices faced by patrons going into a grocery store, and they ran a test where they walked into a store with, I think, 3 to 5 options, one group, and the other group walked into the common store where there's 100 mustards. And a huge chunk of the people that went into the store that had 100, they actually opted not to buy anything because they got so overwhelmed by comparing that they said, forget it, I'm not even going to buy this product. And 100% of the people, I believe, that went into the shop with fewer options, they went out picking something that they liked. Yeah, what I found in the research was that students ended up relying on oversimplified heuristics or assumptions to guide their decision making. And it didn't necessarily mean that they used simplification to pursue a path that was most fulfilling for them. They used simplification to pursue a path that, they used simplification to avoid the feeling of being overwhelmed. And so what a lot of students ended up doing is they felt like they had interest in a certain area, call it engineering or law. And then what they would end up deciding to do when they had to take a decision, apply to universities and kind of set themselves on that path toward a career, is they ignored what they were interested in and they went and did what their parents did, for example. Or they went and they actually pursued an academic program because that's what their friends were going to pursue. And the important takeaway from that is that those simplifications of just saying, okay, I'm just going to do something I'm more familiar with because I've seen my parents in accounting or in finance, so I'm going to do that. It wasn't because they were more interested or felt like they would be more excited or fulfilled by pursuing a path in accounting or finance. It was because they were so overwhelmed by having to pursue a world of information around these new fields, engineering, law, that they wanted to remove themselves from this like stressful process of the paradox of choice.
What's interesting, I heard the other day the same thing is with entrepreneurs. If you don't have an entrepreneur in your family, the odds of being an entrepreneur is, I forget the exact percentage, but significantly lower. You need that. Even if it's a risky endeavor like entrepreneurship,
Yeah,
you will even default to that as your comfort zone because that is what you've seen and you model the behaviors that you've seen over the course of your upbringing. So
sure.
if you're a parent and if you're a parent, you see your child going down the path of the same career as you, but you genuinely know deep down that that's not the right fit for them, what do you do?
Well, I think, and hopefully we get a bit more into like parent influence, because I know there's a lot of parents that are so excited and they love their kids so deeply that they have recommendations for maybe where their young student should go with their life and career. And they're obviously experts on their student or their child. They know them so well, better than possibly anybody else. So those recommendations have a ton of merit. What I think is important to encourage is to encourage that student to go out and pursue the information required to make an intentional decision, right? It's not to say that if a student pursues the job that I did, they're oversimplifying it and it's not for them, right? So that's a bad choice. It's not to say it's not for them to say, hey, the student shouldn't do just what I did because I did. They should go do something else. I think those are kind of irrelevant points. And what's the priority is the student should reflect and understand what things may be interesting to them. If a career path that mirrors what their parents did falls in that bucket, great. But don't stop there. Build an extensive list of areas that feel compelling. And then start to dive into some real information to understand if that university, academic path, if the career paths that stem from that or the doors that will be open to them after that, if those are truly appealing things. And regardless of whether that happens to be the job that a parent had or that a lot of their friends are getting into or not, what's most important is, has that student taken the time and the responsibility to gather relevant information to get a real sense and a feeling for what life will be like if they go to university to study in a certain program at a certain school. And then try to anticipate and feel at the end of third year, fourth year university, does that student really feel like the doors that are going to be open to them to various career paths at that point, are there a good chunk of those that really resonate with them and give them joy and excitement, right? Do they feel like they could apply themselves toward that? I think that's what's most important, is for a parent to encourage their own student to get intentional about this decision, and do what's required to gather the information that's required to start feeling really confident that, yeah, it's impossible to necessarily make a perfect decision, or to be able to play out how the decision is going to impact the rest of their life. There's so many factors that are going to influence that along the way. But the goal is to be confident and make the most clear, intentional decision today. And for most of our clients and the students that I work with, that starts with deciding what university program to pursue.
Yeah, making the best decision with the information that you have on hand. And
Yeah.
basically, what
And
we see is that, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and the best next decision. I think it's important to think of that as well, right? Because of the finality of all this, we think once we choose our career path, we're kind of stuck, we're fixed. That's what I have to do. That's super overwhelming. Life
Yeah, and
goes
that's
on, circumstances change, environmental factors change that may require you to pivot down the road. It's impossible to pre-plan all future decisions today. So what's the best way to focus, or let's say what's our span of focus or scope of focus? It's what's the best decision I can make today. And right now, that's what's the university program of choice. So let's explore all the relevant information around that decision and those fields of interest, so we feel like we can make the best decision we can today. We reduce the risk of future regret, looking back saying, I wish I had done that. I never looked into it.
and you met a lot of students over your time coaching. On a scale of 1 to 10, how clear is the average student about their future?
Coming into the engagement, between a 2 or a 6 out of 10, I would say. And I always try to describe that scale when I ask students to place themselves on it, with a 1 being, I have absolutely no idea. I'm handcuffed. I feel unable to take any first step toward making it. I don't even know where I would look. I don't know what's interesting to me. A 10 would be, ready to graduate from youthfully before you even begin. I already know what I want to do. The application's half written. I know what parts of my profile I want to emphasize in an application. I know how fulfilling that would be, and I don't want to do anything else, right? And so they often lie between a 2 or a 6 on that scale.
And my test that I usually do is when a student is above a 5, usually I ask, okay, what program are you applying to, or what major or whatever? And they say business or health science or computer science. And then I just ask why. And
Hmm.
the answer, if I even get an answer, is typically quite surface level. It is something to do. If it's business, honestly, business is very popular as being the secondary choice.
Hmm.
Sometimes students often
Hmm.
say, oh, I just wasn't good at finance, or well, I wasn't good at math and science, so I decided to go into business. And so in order to have self-awareness, you almost have to like in order to answer that question correctly, you need to have self-awareness. And without that self-awareness, maybe that answer might be a bit inflated. Why do you see that as low between a 2 and a 6, if we're assuming that is accurate once you've like pushed?
It typically comes down to how much they've explored and reflected on their interests, part 1. And part 2 is how much they've explored information on the different pathways, right? So that example that you gave where they say, hey, I'm not good at math, therefore I'm not going to pursue engineering or finance or accounting. That's a great example of one of those simplifying heuristics, right? It's an overwhelming decision. There's too much information. It feels I can't navigate it. I don't know where to start. And so we all do things in our life that simplify down. Well, okay, how am I going to navigate this? Well, I'm not good at math, so there goes half of the fields. Or my friends aren't going to Queens, so I'm going to go somewhere else. Um, these are really signs that someone's just removing themselves from the process of trying to dive in and take responsibility to maybe sift through some information and make an accurate assessment. So identifying that and overcoming it through, in parallel, exploration of what's interesting to you, what's valuable to you, what would give you fulfillment. That comes on more of the introspective, reflective side of things. And then in parallel to that, because as you start to define your interests a bit more clearly, you start to be able to link those interests to potential job fields or academic areas. And once that introspection leads to some interest toward different university programs or career fields, that's only part of it. Then you got to jump in and dive into those programs, career fields, and start to gather information that helps you understand what all the details surrounding it. What is the environment like? What's the culture like? What's going to be asked of me? What's work life look like in a particular field? What are the interactions like? What is the quality of the education there? What are even the courses that are going to be taught? Are those things that resonate with me? And at that point, you start to gather really relevant information that just naturally a student reviewing that type of information is naturally going to gravitate towards some of it and gravitate or I guess move away from it. And that's precisely how the decision is made, right? The interests inform a whole broad scope of things that you could do, but all based on what could be potentially fulfilling. What a great start. And then as you go into the information, you've kind of built this funnel nice and large. And now the information helps you kind of narrow it down to, you know what, this is the program that really feels right. I love the classes. I read a few bios of the professors. They seem like they could have a really positive impact on my life. I've even checked in with some friends, and a few friends are thinking about going to that school. And how lovely would that be to kind of move away from home, but feel really comfortable that I have two of my closest friends going to that school as well. It's not a simplified reason to go there. I've done the rest of my research, but once you start to kind of organize information around a potential choice that you could make, you start to feel inside whether that's the right choice to make or not. And we move closer to that thing that we mentioned earlier in the conversation, which is that decision becomes a lot more intentional at that point. And me, over the course of engagements with students, when they start at a 2 to a 6, you start to see that number increase, and their overall confidence toward making an ultimate decision starts to increase. Their feeling of being underwhelmed or overwhelmed by this whole choice, you see that start to dissipate as they gather more and more relevant information to help inform their decision.
And we do have a proven track record of helping students go from a 2 or a 6 out of 10, like being unclear, to
Mm-hmm.
being more clear about their future,
Mm-hmm.
clear enough that they're confident and, in a certain sense, convicted about the decision that they're
Mm-hmm.
making. What, how do you boil that down in simple sort of steps? I know that you've covered a
Yeah.
bunch, but just if you were to say like 1, 2, 3, this is what we would do with this with a student, how would you kind of boil that down?
So most of the students I've worked with do have a few interest areas defined. So while we work through the blueprint and we talk about skills, strengths, interests, values, very quickly move toward understanding where their interests are, what subject matter, and some of the steps that have proven really, really useful when it comes to academic fields. If somebody says that they're interested in a certain field, call it engineering, great first step is to go understand what subfields exist in engineering, right? So students naturally probably have a pretty novice understanding of what the broad field of engineering actually incorporates, right? They like this idea, but they still don't know enough about what it entails. And so first step, put engineering at the top of a page and branch out all those subfields that exist below it. And this really opens students' mind. And you can insert any other field for engineering, right? It could be law, it could be medicine, it could be teaching. But as soon as you go down one level to the subfields that exist within it, and a great tool for this can actually be something as simple as Wikipedia. Type in engineering, and Wikipedia does a beautiful job of giving you all those blue words, right, highlighted for all the subfields and all these other details around what engineering is. And if any of those catch your interest, you're a click away from getting a full description on what that subfield looks like, or what that particular piece of information within the world of engineering looks like. So breaking it down into that is excellent. Students typically, out of a sub list or a list of the subfields, they typically already naturally gravitate toward a handful of those. Some of those are really pique their interest. And then some of those already they can start crossing off. So you get down to the subfield level, and then of those subfields, we can go the next step, right? So what kind of courses or university programs target each of those, right? Civil engineering versus computer engineering versus mechanical engineering. Maybe all three of those resonate with a student. Say, okay, let's dive into those. So now maybe we get back on Google, or we pursue the information elsewhere. But what does working in that field look like? What are they responsible for? What is the job that they're doing? Start getting into the university world too. So how is a university program positioning civil engineering? What are the courses that are required? What are the areas of emphasis? University websites typically have some really great information where they'll list out what the typical career pathways are if you're to pursue that focus field. And so now that same student who started by saying, I want to be an engineer, now they go one level deeper. They say, I don't want to just be any type of engineer. I want to be one of these three types of engineer. I still don't know which one, but what a great start. And they go down from that into more specific information to understand what that job looks and feels like and requires of an individual, what kind of career paths each of those fields lead to, what a day in the life of working in each of those career fields would look like. And all of a sudden you start to see they're gathering enough information to even now decipher between their interests toward those three fields. And so you keep doing this process to get yourself all the way focused down to kind of an outcome where you might feel, hey, that's something worth pursuing. That's something that continues after all this information that I've gathered in a really focused way. That's something that's really speaking to me. And before I wrap on that, the same process can be done for universities, right? So another common part of this whole decision is not what to study, but where. And those two things have to come together to ultimately submit your applications and confidently accept one, if you're lucky enough to get into multiple. And so the same process can apply, right? Instead of just wanting to go to university A because, a bunch of friends in my homeroom class said that that's where they're going to go and that would be great. Are you sure you want to go there? There's a lot of information we can gather about what's the culture on campus, right? How comfortable are you being close to home or away from home? How easy is it to travel back and forth? What kind of amenities do they have? What are the opportunities on campus? Maybe different schools have different commitments toward things like exchange programs or co-op programs. And so you're kind of balancing these two decisions, big decisions at the same time of not only what, but where. And the same rules apply. Start with your short list and then start going deeper and deeper, following your interests, gathering information and allowing that kind of process or cycle of interest and information to distill you down to really the small handful of choices that you really feel confident would fulfill you.
And what's valuable when students are trying to figure out their future is not being told you should do this, you should be this by somebody else. The approach that we take is almost this facilitated and accelerated meandering approach. And we had this workshop that we led for youthfully families a
Yeah.
few weeks ago now. And we profiled Elon Musk. And Elon Musk is the quintessential career meanderer. But when you peel back the onion and you see that like common red thread or that theme throughout his entire life, it's very clear what that theme is. And he started actually studying business. And then after a couple of years, he meandered and then went to study, I believe, physics at University of Pennsylvania. And I think he did a combination of physics and business at Wharton.
Yeah.
And then he his first business, I believe, was what turned into PayPal. And then he also has the Boring Company. He has a Tesla. He has Neuralink. He has SpaceX. And we always try to go back to values and strengths and getting super hyper clear on those two things. Because if you were to define what his strengths and his values are, what he has done throughout his career and how he's meandered in that in a way that is seemingly very disperse is actually very intentional and deliberate
Hmm.
and thematic. And I think what is super powerful about the process that we do is this facilitated and accelerated meandering. And on top of that, with the access to 110 coaches that we have, putting students in touch with a few of them. So if they're interested in going down the path of like working in electrical engineering, talking to an actual electrical engineer
Yeah.
who works in the field, understand where it's heading, can give you an idea about the day in the life of, we call those like kind of mini apprenticeships or
Yeah.
virtual job shadowing experiences. And then through our internship experiences through passion projects, doing this stuff firsthand, getting an idea firsthand of, is this something that you enjoy? Is this something that you want to pursue further or try something else? So the accelerated meandering can be done in a way that actually you don't have to rely on all the meandering to be done through your 20s and 30s and 40s. You can actually try to accelerate that through a process.
Completely.
Um, it's not to say that meandering still won't continue down the road, but you can do a bulk of that in a facilitated structured approach like coaching and in a way that is empowered and student led, but facilitated and guided by a coach. And we've just seen that as super powerful.
Completely.
Another
And
point that I wanted
it's
to,
actually
oh, go,
it's
go
actually a
ahead.
theme that came up in my master's thesis research as well, was this idea that the best form of reflection is action, or is through action. We can sit and think and consider our passions, our interests, our values for days on end. When we go out in the world and validate them, uh, it just accelerates the reflective process so significantly. And I think Youthfully is so well positioned to support that, because not only is there coaches inspiring reflection and students going home in between two meetings with their coach to work through the blueprint and reflect on what's important to them, but the coaches bring an opportunity to connect that individual with opportunities to go get their hands dirty in a field of interest and say, hey, it's like how a picture is worth 1,000 words. Taking an action and going, spending a day on the job, or talking to an alumni from a university that you want to go to, who's in a field that you want to go to, that can give you so much relevant information back to accelerate your reflection toward validating or refuting. Am I actually interested in that? Is that something I really could do every day, every week for the first part of my career? Is that something that I feel is worthy to shoot toward, would make me feel fulfilled and valued? So I really love that emphasis that, get out and pursue relevant experiences. And from my research point of view, It's completely validated. Almost every one of the 20 students that I interviewed for my thesis, one of the most key moments in them learning what was important to them and what they wanted to do happened immediately following them taking some specific action toward experiencing it in some capacity.
And yeah, in terms of students who might be listening to this who feel as though they are clear about their future, if a student
Mm-hmm.
feels moderately clear about their future, or even more than moderately clear about their future, they might be wondering, do I need to get more clear? I already know I want to go into engineering, or I already know I want to be a doctor. Why do I need to get more clear? Well, this is also useful for university applications, for talking to people out there and putting your specific goals out there. So if if you have two applicants and one applicant is applying, both applicants are applying to the same engineering school. One
Mm-hmm.
applicant knows the exact specific subfield that they want to go into and
Mm-hmm.
why. And they've done the research, they've spoken to the people, and they've done this and that. The other student just knows they want to go into engineering because they like a course that they've taken at their school.
Mm-hmm.
Which student would you admit if you were a university? Of course, the one that's done the more research. And so this is not only valuable for these students who feel unclear, it's very valuable for a student who feels moderately to mostly clear.
Absolutely. And maybe we can differentiate that a bit between like the what and the how. So a student who's really clear on what they want to do, that's great. There's many ways for how they can do that, right? And you referenced the university application, where students may have to write essays articulating their intention, why it's of interest. We also know on those university applications, there's a lot of room for extracurricular interests and accomplishments to help differentiate a student, right, in the application process. And so the what may be clear, right? I want to study this, but how am I going to a differentiate my profile in a productive way, so that I have the best chance of getting in or gaining scholarship money or other forms of kind of recognition through the application process, um, but also how am I going to best position myself to thrive in that field as well? Are there things that I can work on? Are there parts of my behavior profile that maybe don't fit right now as well with that field as they could? I'm super interested in it, so I'm going to pursue that. But how can I kind of position myself to get the most out of that university experience, find the greatest success, greatest fulfillment? So the what versus the how, I think maybe those people who are more clear on what they want to do still have a lot of kind of value to be gained from exploring the how piece.
And And in terms, we talked about other tools that students can use to help make their decisions. And if I were to
Mm,
recommend one tool that they could use to help make a decision about their future, would be ChatGPT. Because you can ask ChatGPT questions about different careers, give them information about yourself,
mm,
and it will help you with the decision you have at hand. It may not be
mm,
perfect, but it depends on the prompt. If you can prompt it correctly, then it can help give you the information that you need to make a
mm.
better and clearer decision. What other advice would you give students, or tactical tips to students who are in this situation? Anything else that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, we might make a really complementary team on this because you're tech focused, innovative tools at your disposal. I might be a bit more old school and traditional on this, but talk to people. And I mean that in a broad sense of the term people. There's a lot of stakeholders who have all the information at their fingertips. Um, and if you can identify them and ask them questions that allow you to get information related to what's important to you, what you're excited about, what you're curious about understanding, that's vital. I'll give you two examples. So one is there's often a lot of questions that students have around the real details and particulars of the application process. And in working together, they've done an excellent job going through the University of Interest's websites and finding all the information that's kind of publicly available. But there's still a few outstanding questions, whether it's related to, I don't know, dates or positioning an application or the importance of emphasizing A over B in an essay. And something I often encourage them to do is reach out to the admissions department, right? These are the people who are going to be reviewing the applications and who sit in on meetings every week to talk about the process from the university's perspective. They'll have the answers, right? So go talk to them. Prepare your best email with your short list of questions. If it's a phone call that you prefer, prepare your best email to demonstrate your interest. Promise them that you're going to not abuse the time you have with them, but you'll come well prepared, and ask them your 3 to 4 questions. And chances are they have exactly the information that you're looking for. The other kind of example that works really, really well is if you're interested in a certain university program or a career field, how can we identify a person that is either currently living that journey at that university or in that early career, or who has recently, and go see if we can't get a 30-minute, an hour-long phone call with them where you can come really prepared with your best questions to get information from them that helps you really understand what that experience is like. What would those people have, maybe done differently in their application to better position themselves for scholarship? What did they do in the application that in hindsight they felt, I spent way too much time on that. It wasn't as important a part of the application. So I recommend maybe spend less on this and more on that. How has the first few years in civil engineering been, right? But not so generally, maybe be a bit more specific to the things that are interesting to you as the student. But there's people living the experiences that the students are evaluating right now. And going and talking to, 3 or 4 people in a domain of interest or a career field that you're interested in, and preparing, really taking the responsibility to prepare what's important for you to better understand and make the most use of those short phone calls with those people, I still think is an invaluable way of gathering information.
Let's talk about parents for a second, because we
Yeah,
see parents have very much a an interest in where their child ends up. Parents
for
just want
sure.
their kids to be successful. And so how do students navigate that? How do parents navigate that where there's this sort of dynamic in involvement, but yet parents want to leave this as much as possible to the student, but want to make sure they make the right decision. Like, should students choose a path based on what their parents want? Should parents intervene more than a certain degree? What's your general advice on that?
In my experience, parents want the students to feel confident, to not feel anxious and overwhelmed, and to do something that's going to fulfill them. I think, as may often be the case with parents and students going through their adolescent years, it may not be as directly stated as that from the parent's point of view, and it may not be as clearly understood as that from the student's point of view, right? But they want what's best for their kid in every sense that I've experienced so far. Uh, Sometimes it comes across in different ways, but really deep down, that's what they're looking for. So my comment to students, I guess, on that would be, understand that your parents know you better than anybody. They're not suggesting ideas that are going to walk you down a path of that they feel are going to walk you down a path of lower fulfillment, or it's self-serving to them in any capacity. They're saying it because they think they saw something in your behavior profile or what you've been interested in throughout your childhood that they think fits with a specific job field or university program, field of study. Explore it. do them the service of exploring it. Maybe they're on to something, maybe they're not. Um, but what I feel is most valued by parents through this process, parents specifically of youthfully, students working with youthfully, is my challenge to students: come back to your parents able to articulate why or why not you're interested in a particular field, whether it's a field that you've identified for yourself or whether it's a field that your parents have proposed to you. I'm just working with a student now who did just had made wonderful progress in this exact area. Her parent was interested in them becoming an architect for all the right reasons. Loved to draw, great level of detail. Loves to see the outcomes of their work. The parent knows a few architects and thought, hey, there's a lot of similarities in the general approach. The student, on the other hand, was more interested in teaching. And at first, there was a bit hostility between the two in the sense that the student didn't really want to pursue architecture because the parent had proposed it, right? And just because of that, it's like, no, that's not for me. I want to do my own thing. Don't tell me what I should or shouldn't do. But in the end, we said, why don't we lean into that and look into and research the field of architecture just as we have everything else, to just make sure that that's not the field for you, right? Find some information that's going to help you understand and articulate back to your parents the why. And at the end of the day, the parent was so thrilled, if not honored, that the student explored their recommendation. And they were so open to the student coming back and saying, hey, mom, dad, I appreciate that was something you thought was a fit, but here's how I can see that it is a fit. But here's the 4 or 5 reasons why I just don't think that's for me. I don't think I would be compelled, fulfilled, confident, happy going into that field. And the discussion stopped at that point. The parent was so happy that they took the suggestion, ran with it as far as they could, and then came back with a really clear description for why they felt that going another path was the right one for them. And from that point on, once the parents felt like their student was really on a path to doing something that was fulfilling for them, they were completely supportive.
And in psychology, there's a process known as individuation. So why do students, particularly in their teenage years, want to be resistant from not only parents telling them what to do or giving them advice, but just anyone, teachers, anyone at all? And it's because they're undergoing in psychology this process called individuation. And that's this sort of subconscious process of developing their own self. And they see any external influences that will have some level of that they believe is going to have control over that. They try to push that away. And that's also why the coaching approach during the teenage and just overall student years is so effective, because especially when it's done by a third party like a youth coach, because we don't have any skin in the game. The only thing that we care about is genuinely the student getting to a level that they want to get to, getting to the place where they want to be, developing that self. And we don't know them until that first interaction. So we come into this being sort of this like safe figure, which is it's very interesting. We're going to end up just with some rapid fire questions.
Awesome.
And so the first one is, what's the one skill every student should develop no matter what career path they choose?
I believe taking personal responsibility. In this context, for navigating this decision, if you as a student want to individuate and begin to become your own independent adult, that comes with the responsibility of pursuing the right information, making the right decisions, and not only identifying what it is you want to do for your career, but taking the responsibility to prepare your profile and prepare yourself to be able to do it successfully and maintain a successful career. that's all on your shoulders. So getting more comfortable with the sense of responsibility and seeing it as an opportunity and not a burden, I think is a really, really valuable skill for all students to prioritize developing.
It's funny because I was speaking to a few professors and asking them
Yeah.
a similar question, and they have a very similar response, particularly for first year students. Okay.
Yeah.
Next one. Can you have a successful career without being passionate about your job?
Short answer, yes. And me, I don't know if I've thought myself through this question yet. It's something that's been on my mind, this idea of purposeful versus meaningful for some years. And I don't know where I net out yet. But the short answer, yes, you can have a successful career without being passionate. I believe that to be true. Um, but it's important to nuance that in a few ways. I think it's really important to understand your balance and need for doing work that the work itself you find meaningful or something that aligns more closely with your passion, but also meets the practical needs that come with life. You might want to move out from your parents' house. You might want to buy a car. You might, at some point in the future, when you listen to this podcast for the second or third time, you might be ready to start a family. These things do come with practical requirements, right? And so maybe you do need to be ready to dial down a little bit the more meaningful, passionate work if it means that you can get a job that's not too distant from that, but delivers more against the practical needs that you have in your life. I think that's really important. I think another nuance is um, defining what's meaningful to you. I had a really good friend. We were both about 5 years into our career, and we went out, and he was at a crossroads in his, and he was working for a job that he didn't find the work itself to be that meaningful, and he was considering a career change. And we had a wonderful conversation about the merits of changing career or staying in it. And I remember a year later, we met up again, and he had actually pursued a job in the same exact field. And my first question to him was, how did you reconcile the fact that that wasn't meaningful to you, but then you doubled down and you stayed in it? And he said he did a lot of reflecting around what was meaningful to him. And what was meaningful to him wasn't necessarily that his work was going to deliver some greater impact or purpose or fulfill some passion that he had, but the job that he stayed in gave him so many practical benefits, be it salary, title, um, balance between work and life, what have you, that he was feeling completely fulfilled by the fact that he could spend time with his family, support his family, have the freedom and flexibility to continue to maintain a social life and all these wonderful things outside of work. And so for him, the job specifically wasn't totally aligned with his passions, but it enabled him to pursue so many passions that were important to him outside of work. And so I think those are two really important nuances to consider when you, as students or parents, inevitably come across this theme of pursue what you're passionate about or interested in exclusively, because there's a lot of people that speak to that theme. Um, but personally, I don't think it's as simple as that necessarily. And those two nuances are important consideration.
Should students take a gap year or start university right away?
Hmm. Um, of course, this is unique to the individual, so I don't know if there's a universal rule or statement to be made here. But I do believe strongly that gap years can be really valuable if they're done purposefully. So, what are the objectives for that gap year? What is the experience to be gained? What kind of reflections need to take place? How are you going to move yourself closer in that gap year to doing what we talked about earlier? And by the end of that gap year, being more clear in knowing what you want to do and how you want to do it or pursue it. I think that's really vital. A gap year for the sake of slowing things down, avoiding having to make a big decision. Those to me feel like less justified reasons for doing it. Yeah.
And should students spend a summer internship at a company that they're unsure about or volunteer in a field that they're curious about?
I think it's tough to answer without knowing the practical implications of that. If the student has to put themselves through school financially, it may be hard to go all in on a volunteer opportunity that might not compensate them, um, because it just wouldn't align with their objectives. What I love about the question is you're kind of proposing two things that I think are great ideas in general, and that's the idea of getting out of your own notebook and reflections about what you should or could do, and going out and getting some experience at the end of the day. So me, if I can cheat the question, I would say both are super valuable things to do. Kudos to any student that sees summer as an opportunity not just to relax and be with friends, but maybe start practice taking some responsibility in exploring potential future pathways through real experiences, whether that's internship, volunteer, um, or even some other opportunities to do the same, whether that's talking with certain alumni or family friends, to just continue to gather information that can help you feel more comfortable and confident to pursue the academic and career pathways that are most interesting and most likely to fulfill you.
And yeah, that's it in terms of the rapid fire questions. Anything
Awesome.
else that you want to leave the audience, students, parents with thoughts that we may have not covered? Additional kind of final advice or guidance or ideas, questions to share, to pose for reflection?
I guess in a few words, it's okay that the decision feels overwhelming. It's the first time you, as students, are going to make such a big decision in your life. Um, so accept yourself for that and accept the feelings that come with that, whether that's a bit of stress, pressure, sense of being overwhelmed. Accept the interactions you might have with parents or other stakeholders who have an interest in what you want to do. But Joel, as you talked about the individualization, you want to do it yourself. Um, but in wanting to navigate this decision and pursue a career path that's meaningful to you, there's a lot of responsibility required with that. And it's the perfect time to dial up your investment in taking responsibility, because as soon as university's done and you begin your career, uh, you're really the person who's going to be responsible for the impact you make and the outcomes that you earn from work and life. So by taking that responsibility, I think it is possible to turn this, what feels maybe initially as an overwhelming, confusing, difficult set of decisions for choosing university and career, and turn those into like opportunities that start to feel exciting. And if you invest in the process of finding the right information and thinking about what's interesting and potentially fulfilling for you, I've seen it with many students that I work with. They go from that, 2, 3, 4 on the scale out of 10, where they're feeling a bit dejected and low motivation. And that can turn into a 7, 8, 9 out of 10. And when we show up at meetings, you can just tell that there's a different energy and excitement. And now this whole process of making a big decision went from being overwhelming to being exciting. And we really focus on it as like an opportunity at that point. So it's if it feels far away, it's not as far away as you think. Um, Dive in and do the work and get excited about what possible pathways you can pursue in the future.
Awesome. Well, as somebody who started their career early on as a butcher, Andrew, and then now is a career development expert, learning and
Mm-hmm.
development expert, youth coach, but it specializes in this topic. You've done your fair share of meandering yourself, as have I, as have so many people,
Yeah.
and I think that's a common takeaway for our conversation today, as well as taking action. Taking action is in the absence of clarity
Hmm.
take action. It will help you get more clarity, know yourself, know your strengths, reflect on your interests, speak to people,
Hmm.
mentors, people who work in specific areas that you're interested in. There's a lot of great nuggets here that hopefully students and parents can leverage. So yeah, thanks for coming on. We're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah, I look forward to the next time, and thanks a ton for having me on this time. It's great to explore some of these important themes with you, Joel.
Appreciate it.